Now let's address spacing in our site. We want to add margins and padding and borders and columns, and we'll start with columns. We want to take this about section and move it over here to the right. So let's go over to our index.html page. I've already got it coded here, and we'll talk about what this does. First, we're going to code it by hand, and then we're going to use the Bootstrap classes. Now, in this case, Bootstrap classes are much more intricate than what we're going to be doing. It's one of the benefits of Bootstrap. And the reason for the difference is Bootstrap is responsive, which means if you change the size of the screen, it will change the layout. So if it's viewed on a smartphone or a large monitor, it's going to be aligned differently. We're not going to get into that detail when setting it up by hand. So there's going to be a little bit of a difference in our classes versus Bootstrap's. Okay, so on the outside div, we've got a class of row and then this grid 67-33. Those are going to represent the percent of each column. Then we close our div here, and then for our about section, we wrap that in a div and give it a class of col MD4, or columns medium size 4. Bootstrap uses a grid of 12 columns, so each of these are in relation to a 12-column grid. So this represents 1/3 of the space, and this represents 2/3. We'll look at the CSS in a second. Let's just see what it looks like when we save it. Okay, it now moved the About section over here. Let's go to our article template. And let's take a look at the article template page before these changes. We're going to move this table of contents over to the right of the main article. So looking at our code here, we're also going to wrap this section in a div with a class of row and grid 75-25. The dimensions are a little bit different than on the other page. We're going to use this main tag by adding a class of col MD9, so 9 of 12 columns. This one is just for Bootstrap, not for our own coding. The main element closes here, and then our sidebar starts here. We'll add a class to it of col MD3, so 3 of 12. Delete this. And we've got our closing div for the whole row. Let's save it. And you can see the sidebar moved over here. Now let's look at our style sheet and see what style rules we created. For the row class, we added the display property and set it to a grid. For our grid 6733, we used the grid template columns property, and that sets the columns in our grid. We can add as many as we want. Here we just have 2. And we're using percentage, so 67% of the screen is for the first column, 33 is for the second. We've got a similar class, grid 75-25, is for our articles template page, and the first column there is 75% and the second column is 25%. Now let's fix one last thing. If you look at the table of contents, you'll notice there's no gap between it and the article content. Let's go ahead and fix that and add a gap there. And the same is true on the index page next to the About section. So let's start with the index page. We'll add a class here called G5, save it with Command S, and go to Article Template. Okay, we already added that class. Let's define the class. I actually got it defined down here. Okay, so our selector is the G5 class, and it's got 2 properties here, one for grid gap and one for gap. The grid is fairly new to CSS, and they originally named this property grid gap and since changed it to gap. So we'll just define it for both those property names in case someone has an older browser. The value we'll set it is 3 RM. We'll talk about in the next section what RM means, but that's the gap we're going to use. Let's save it. Now keep your eye right here. I'm going to hit Command S to save it. You'll notice the gap was created. However, we got a new problem. The gap just pushed our sidebar over here to the right. The reason for that is we used exact percentages for the column widths there's another option called fraction of available screen. Right now, 2/3 of the screen is for the article, 1/3 is for the sidebar. If we use fraction of available screen, we'll change that to 2 fractions and 1 fraction. So add those up, that's 3. So this is 2/3 of the screen and this is 1/3 of the screen. And while we're at it, we'll do the same here. 3 fractions and 1 fraction. So add 3 and 1 together, that's fourths. So 3/4 of the screen will be for the first column and 1/4 of the screen will be for the second. That'll take the grid gap into account. Let's save it with Command S, keep your eye here, and it moved it back in. Delete this. Now let's take a look at how to do this in Bootstrap. We'll start by going to their website. Search for grid. It'll take us to their grid page. And here's an example, a simple grid with 3 columns, each of equal length. You wrap them all in a div with a class of row. It doesn't have to be a div, but it has to be a block element. And then each column is wrapped in a class called call. Here we're not specifying a width. It'll calculate the width based on the number of columns. Now I mentioned Bootstrap is responsive, which means it will change the layout based on the width of the screen. So if it's viewed on a smartphone, it'll have one layout. If it's viewed on a computer screen monitor, it'll have another. We're using a breakpoint of MD. So what will happen is we'll have 2 columns if it's wider than this 768 pixels, and then it'll collapse it to 1 column, one on top of the other, if it's smaller. Now let's go back to our code. Now here's that row class we talked about in an outer div, and embedded in that is a class called callMD8, so a column using the MD breakpoint, middle breakpoint, of 8 columns, 8 out of 12. And for the about section, we've got a div with a class callMD4, so 4 out of 12. Now this class, this grid 6733, that's for our own code. This is not a Bootstrap class, so Bootstrap will just ignore this. Now let's enable the Bootstrap CDN link and disable our own link so that we're using the Bootstrap classes, not our own. Let's save it. Now one thing you'll notice is the columns went away, and there might be a reason for that. And there is. Bootstrap is responsive, so when the screen is too narrow, it'll stack it one on top of the other, and when it's wide enough, it'll put it side by side. Let's do the same thing for our article template. Comment out our own CSS and enable Bootstrap. Save it. And again, it's too narrow, so it's just stacking our divs one on top of the other. You look down here, here's our table of contents. If we make the screen wider, there it goes. Okay, that's a good introduction to the grid and responsive websites.